Hey, all you fantastic scrappers out there. Traci Reed here from tracireed.com with the first video in my new tutorial series, What's Your Style? Defining and demonstrating scrapbook styles for the everyday scrapper. Do you feel like your layouts have no cohesion or style to them? Are you wondering if there are rules you're missing somewhere, or if you were absent the day that they handed out the scrapping handbook? Well, this video series will help you define and decide on your own personal style, all while giving you tips and guidelines for every other style along the way. If you've ever wondered, hey, how come my layouts never look like that? Your time has come. In this series, we will cover many of the different scrapping styles out there, from whitespace to clusterriffic, what they are and what they aren't, and I will give you advice on how to achieve them without ripping all of your hair out. So let's get started. This week, we're going to talk all about whitespace. Now, if you are not a minimalistic scrapper, I know what you're thinking. Whitespace is the art of using a little teeny photo on a big old canvas, slapping a flower on there, and calling it good. But this couldn't be further from the truth. Whitespace, or minimalistic layouts, require just as much skill and precision as the heavily clustered pages. They're just skilled in a different way. So let's talk about this, shall we? How about we start with a definition? Hold on, because it's a long one. Whitespace is defined as the portion of the page left unmarked, the space between graphics, figures, and objects drawn or depicted. The term arises from the graphic design practice where printing processes generally use white paper. White space should not be considered merely blank space. It is an important element of design which enables the objects in it to exist at all. The balance between positive or non-white and the use of negative spaces is a key to aesthetic composition. In other words, a balanced design that uses white space alternately gives your eye something to look at, aka positive space, and somewhere to rest, aka negative or white space. So what does all this mean? Let's get down to the nitty-gritty and explain white space in scrapping terms, shall we? White space is the area around the central composition of your layout. All of this stuff that I've scribbled and read over. White space layouts generally consist of one cluster of photos, elements, and journaling, but there may be additional small clusters as well to create visual balance on the page. Here are some common misconceptions about white space. First, white space layouts have to be done on a solid, if not actually white, background paper. This couldn't be further from the truth. Some of the best white space layouts are done on gorgeous patterned papers. 2. White space layouts use little to no embellishment. This is a common misconception, but as you can see on this layout, embellishment is quite necessary for a beautiful composition. Finally, white space layouts consist of a lot of blank space with one teeny tiny photo somewhere on the page. Again, while this is a style that some people prefer, it isn't a necessary component of all white space layouts, and your photo can still be a large part of the surface area of the design, even in a white space layout. Okay, now that I've defined white space for you and dispelled some of the common misconceptions, let's chat about how you can achieve balance on a white space layout. You must create enough visual weight with your cluster that your page doesn't feel empty or unfinished. What do I mean by this? I mean that in order to achieve a white space layout that doesn't just look unfinished, you need to ensure that your final product has enough going on that it doesn't look like you just stopped in the middle of making your layout and decided, poof, all done. For example, let's look at the evolution of this layout of my son Josiah and his skateboard. In the first example, I have my photo, paper matting, journaling, and title. Do you feel like this layout is done when you look at it? Yes, all of the things that are required to tell the story are present, but to me, the layout still looks unfinished. But what happens if I add just a few elements? Now that looks a bit better. I've only added 5 elements to my layout, but what I've done is create a visual triangle around my composition that grounds your eye and draws it into the cluster, visually separating it from the white space of the layout even further. Right now, my layout is looking pretty close to done, but there are a couple of other steps we can take to further our composition. What this cluster needs is some grounding. What is grounding, you ask? It's an element that simultaneously separates from and anchors your composition to the page. It can be done in many ways, but most often is done with paint or doodles like I've done here. Now, this page could be done, but something still feels a little unbalanced to me. This is where your creative expression comes in handy. Don't be afraid to create another small cluster to give your eyes somewhere else to go and lead it off the page. This is one of my favorite tricks in scrapbooking. By creating this cluster on the right-hand side of the page, not only did I emphasize the importance of the main composition by repeating the arrows and pointing them back towards the main cluster, but I also gave my viewer a way to leave my page visually, all while adding just a tad bit more interest to the composition. So let's recap. Whitespace is the art of creating a minimalist layout that uses negative space to emphasize the important parts of your design that you want your viewer to recognize. Whitespace does not mean literal white or any solid color space, necessarily, with a teeny tiny photo on it, nor does it mean that your layout is unfinished. You can't use embellishment or doesn't follow the basic rules of design such as the visual triangle. And that, my friends, is Whitespace in a nutshell. Feel free to leave comments or questions below and join us next week as we tackle another scrapping style in the What's Your Style video tutorial series. Did you find this tutorial helpful? Do you think that someone else would? Feel free to hit the share button below and tell a friend, or even pin it to Pinterest. I'll see you next time.